This show contains movie spoilers and swearing. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Bitesize Cinema. I'm your host RJ McCready, and for this episode I'm very excited to be able to talk about the epic action movie which came out in 2015, and that is Mad Max Fury Road. And joining me for the show today is my good friend and buddy Bo Ransel. Bo, how you doing?
I'm doing great. My world is fire and pain. We started the conversation immediately with like, oh my god, this is so much fun to talk about. This movie is so good. I'm so excited to be here and talking about Mad Max Fury Road.
Well, you know what I'm going to do, Bo, because it's that type of movie. I think we're both itching to just want to talk about it. I think we should just go ahead and play a trailer. I think we should get into the Interceptor, fire it up, and I think we should just get straight onto it, and then we'll talk about everything else later. All right, guys.
Much like the movie itself, no screwing around. Let's just hit the pedal.
I'm just going to jump off the cliff, get onto that hangar, and we're going to take you off, and we're going to get onto it. And here we go. So we'll see you soon.
Is she taking them? I want them back! They're my property!
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Want to get through this?
Let's go!
As the world fell, each of us in our own way was broken. It was hard to know who was more crazy. Me or everyone else.
And welcome back, guys. So the synopsis of this film is: in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, a woman rebels against a tyrannical ruler in search for her homeland with the aid of a group of female prisoners, a psychotic worshipper, and a drifter named Max. It's got 8.1 on IMDb. It's a 15, and well, let's get into it. Bo, Mad Max Fury Road.
Yeah. First of all, George Miller was 118 years old when he directed this movie.
Yeah.
And it feels like it was directed by the crank guys who like went to film school.
Yeah.
Since the last time that you heard from them. Like, it is just such. Just to get it out of the way, this movie is a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
Not just for George Miller, for any old body. But for George Miller at the age, he was in his 70s. He was, like 77, something like that?
Yeah, I think that was his age, yeah.
And when he directed this, and it's both the work of someone who knows how to make a movie, because it's incredibly confident and ballsy, but it's also the work of someone who's just like, hey, how about we crash some cars, yeah? And it's this crazy blending of cinematic genius and complete adolescent fantasy.
I think, to me, it's like, I'm going to shout out Matthew Tangent here, who's one of our sort of fellow listeners and podcasters. And he said to me, we reviewed Space Hunter: Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, and he said to me, he said it's a bit like being a couple of kids in the backyard playing with some cars and just trying to destroy them and get this sort of epic chase. So you've got a little bit of a story, but you're going to try and destroy everything and chuck dirt on it and probably make your own explosions. And this is kind of what this film feels like, but with a $150 million budget and a director like what you just said. Man, I'm going to show you how to make an action movie in 2015, you know. This is how you do it.
Like, forget all this Marvel. Like, I love Marvel movies and all that. I'm a real sucker for them. But this is one of those movies that's like, forget all that, you know, nonsense CGI action stuff. This is going to be raw, visceral, kind of real world stunts for the most part. I mean, there's definitely some CGI at work here, but it's mostly used to sweeten the effects and stunts that exist.
Yeah,
and that's why it absolutely rocks from jump. You know, which is like, to go back to the original statement about, like, you know, how this movie begins. It's just that, you know, the studio logo accompanied by the sound of an engine revving.
Yeah.
And you haven't hit frame 1 of the film yet, and it's just like, everybody get ready. We're about to rock. And then you get that brief look at Max standing on, you know, the top of this rocky dune or whatever, and this two-headed lizard, and him giving this monologue about, like, how the world is shit and everything is crap, and the only thing that he can do in this world is survive.
Yeah.
And like, you see him hear something, drive away, and then the camera holds on him driving away as a bunch of these dune buggies and shit leap over the camera into the frame, starting the movie. And that all happens in the first, like, 3 minutes, and you are immediately bought in. It is so good. It is such a good opening to this movie that it makes me sick.
Yeah, it's very. When I watched it, I thought that's very typical of Mad Max, especially number 2. I think that opens up the same, doesn't it, with the dune buggies almost leaping from behind you as an audience onto the screen, and then chasing Max. And from the start, like you say, you hear the turn of an engine. And I remember I came out of the cinema after watching this, and I think I quoted, I said, "Oh my God, I feel like I was in the back of a stolen car for a couple of hours,
sure.
And it just wouldn't stop." And I'm like, and I'm hanging on, going, "Oh my God!" Is this, you know, it's like I'm sort of flinging from side to side with this car, and I've got to be honest with you. I came away and I just sort of went, I need some time to absorb this movie, because it just went 100 miles an hour. It's no criticism to this film, but every time I watch it, I feel like I notice something different in detail. So I might, you know, notice another Morton John's, you know, Hellboy's cars and goes, "Oh yeah, look at that," you know. And, it's certainly, every time you watch it, I think you see something different, which is always good for a film, I think. And I think we say that a lot about our classic movies, you know, that we all hold and love. You know, we sort of go over it in detail.
Yeah. Well, you can tell the people who made this movie, George Miller in particular, loved it.
Yeah.
You know, like, every nook and cranny of this movie has some little detail or some little bit of, like, production design, world building that plants you deeper into the world of Mad Max. And to your point about, like, getting something new on repeat viewings, weirdly, this was probably, I don't know, the 5th time I've seen it.
Yeah.
Because I watch it about once a year, and this was maybe the first time I really appreciated how good Tom Hardy is in it, and how funny he is at times. And because you're just like, when I watch this movie, I'm just so overwhelmed, because, you know, plenty of people have said this before, but Mad Max is not the main character of any Mad Max movie. He is the character that the audience views what happens through, and he is not the main character of this movie. The main character of this movie is really Furiosa.
Yeah.
And in a similar way that the Road Warrior, like Mad Max, is in that movie, and he's critical to the movie, but the main characters are really, or the main story is really about, this clan at war with this, overlord over gas and this siege of their town. And, Mad Max plays a role in that. Just like in this, the story isn't Mad Max doing something. The story is Furiosa leading these women away from Immortan Joe.
Yep.
And Mad Max is just along for that ride. And it's fascinating, but it also it's brilliant because it sort of hides how good Tom Hardy is. And even though a big part of this, of course, is his redemption as well, but I mean, it's just one of those things of like, oh yeah, I'm just this movie is so good, I'm just now getting around to how good Tom Hardy is in it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up because I thought that this time around. I think because I was taking notes and looking at it with a critical eye. You have actually got about 5 or 6 different characters in this, and you can sort of see it from their perspective. Even whether that's Immortan Joe's perspective, trying to get the girls back, and Furiosa's story of trying to get to this oasis, I suppose you could say. And then you've got Nicholas Holt's character, and he's trying to sort of go to Valhalla. And then obviously and then like you said, you're very rightly said, and I'm glad you brought this up. Then you've got Mad Max, and you're thinking, oh my god, hang on a second, I'm watching a Mad Max movie, but for the first sort of 30-40 minutes, he's chained up to the front of this Warboy car. And what I think's really clever about this film is you've really got to pay some attention to him as well to see how he actually gets through that, with everything else that's going on. So you've got Fusori's trying to get away on the truck, but then you look at Max and you think, hang on a second, how does he actually get out of this, and how does he get onto the truck? And it's very clever for a film that is a action movie with everything that's going on, and it has kind of got a plot that is thin but works, and you've got a lot of characters that support that as well. It's just, it's incredible.
I mean, it's a masterclass, as Duncan would point out. Like, you're right, the plot's thin, but the characters aren't terribly complicated.
No,
but they're really good. They're rich. Like Furiosa, you don't know a lot about her. You know enough, and she alludes to things. And so you understand her character without necessarily knowing all the details, and that's kind of the one of the great things about Mad Max movies in general is that George Miller doesn't give you there's no character that's going to stop and give you all the exposition. That's like, oh, you mean you're coming from Gastown? Well, Gastown has a relationship with us, and that kind of stuff. All that stuff, the movie just happens, and like you said, you're kind of in the back seat along for the ride. In this stolen car full of war boys.
Yeah.
And
it's I think it's very clever how you can have a character and you like say you look at Furiosa and you think, I've only just seen her for a couple of minutes on the screen, but I feel like I already know her. You know that she carries a little bit of weight in Immortan John's oasis or whatever you call it, or his, and the other thing I was going to say here as well is, obviously Tom Hardy is filling the boots of Mel Gibson's character, and I've got to admit, this is no criticism. I seem to be saying this as well, no criticisms, because I find it hard to try and find one with this film, but it's not like I feel like I'm missing Mel Gibson. But I love Mel Gibson in the other films, but that's a credit to Tom Hardy because I feel like he's just jumped in and I'm totally sold with him playing Max. And I think he does a good job of it.
Yeah, there's the stuff in the movie that Miller does showing Max like ghosts of his daughter and people that, who he feels he has allowed to die.
Yeah.
That Max, if nothing else, is a victim of some really severe survivor's guilt, where he feels that his especially his wife and child, which of course is a callback to the original movie, that him not being there when they died, that haunts him, and he's haunted by figures of both of them throughout the film, particularly his daughter, though, who eventually leads him to his redemption. But yeah, I mean, but that stuff is, again, it's kind of under. You don't necessarily have to get into that part of the movie to enjoy it because it's pretty brief. But that's the storytelling that Miller employs here, where the character of Max is never going to tell a character how he's feeling. But you understand throughout this movie that he goes through this period of, like, yes, he is half crazed because he is in pure survival mode, but he's also haunted by these visions of his family that he thinks he's killed. And throughout this movie, that starts to go away, and he becomes more of a person and starts making decisions that are more human, like, I'm doing this for the greater good, not for survival.
Yeah.
And so that's his arc through the movie. But again, none of that is telegraphed. It's just it's all there. It's just not in your face. And it's so wonderfully done, and there's such a nice light touch to all of the storytelling that, like you said, it's not a deep story, but it absolutely carries the weight of these characters and their emotions and the action. Like, it's perfect for what this movie is.
Yeah, that's right. And like I say, the plot is, Furiosa's trying to get away from her Molten John to this oasis where she originally grew up. And obviously when she gets there, it's disappeared, or it's crumbled down, isn't it, into like a sort of bog. And then obviously Max comes up with the idea to say, well, the best place for us to go is back to where we come from, because we've just drawn everybody out, and we're just going to go back and sort of face the snake's head. And it's just like, you've just had this incredible sequence where they've just tried to get out, and you've got all the action, and Max has this kind of unsteady alliance, doesn't he, with Furiosa, and I think it's great. There's some great moments there. I love the bit when he's actually in the driver's seat and he helps one of the girls out, and he just turns around and he just puts his thumb up, and it's almost like Max is kind of just easing into this uneasy alliance, but he's thinking, it's coming together, and I love it, and it's just really good I suppose character building from an audience perspective, because we know that Max is 80% cynical, I'd say, but 20% he's gonna come through for somebody in the end, doesn't he?
He's still got that cop side of him.
Yeah.
And he shows like his emergency medical training and stuff in this movie a little bit. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Max is a good guy. He's just in a world that doesn't allow you to be a good guy. And like, it's just too rough. You don't have time to make a lot of those moral decisions. But when given the opportunity, Max always makes the right choice. When push comes to shove, and like, there's, speaking of the relationship between him and Furiosa, it starts, of course, because he's in pure survival mode and doesn't trust any. I mean, he's a wounded animal, and so is she. And so, at first there's no trust and that kind of thing. And one of my favorite moments, though, is as they're sort of learning that, hey, maybe the other person isn't out to get them, then there's that moment where the Bullet Boy tank is coming up behind them, and they're down to 4 bullets, and Max is trying to shoot out the light, misses a couple of times, and there's only 1 bullet left. And Furiosa comes up behind him, and he just, like, he hesitates for a second, and then he's like, fuck it, and just hands her the gun. And then she uses him to steady the aim, and says, like, okay, don't breathe. And then she shoots out the light, and it's really the first moment where it's like, oh, they are working completely symbiotically now. And in the final chase, that's how it is. They have each other's backs, and they're fighting for each other. And it's great. It's a great like evolution of those characters because again, this movie is a masterpiece and everything about it's great.
Yeah.
And even this relationship between Max and Furiosa is handled with that same light touch, but it's so satisfying. And it ends just poetically with a look between them.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's so good.
I like that. Going back to that bit there with the sniper rifle and the ammo dude, which I find funny actually, especially when he blows his eyes out and they've got a flare and they're going, "Put it in front of my face." Well, I am. It's like I can't see anything. Little bits of
closer.
humour.
It's right in front of your face.
It's like little bits of humour like that. But like I say, that bit there, I suppose when you look at it in detail, it is basically a little moment between Furiosa and Max saying, usually I'd be able to do this by myself, but it's me handing that rifle over to her to say, hell, sometimes I need somebody else to help me out. And
right, and
it's
you're
cool.
better at this.
Yeah, so it's great.
Yeah, it's... and even, as you said, like the thrust of this story is her kind of taking away the breeding wives of Immortan Joe.
Oh God, yeah.
But even those characters are not just completely uniform background characters. Nope. They all kind of have their little moments. Mm-hmm. And there's one girl that's just like, fuck this is hard out here. I want to go back.
Yeah.
Like,
I didn't have a bad time. Didn't have a bad deal in the end, really, with Immortan Joe.
Was it perfect? No, but hey, what out here is. But I do like in this movie, though, that you do have places, like, even though we don't see, Gastown and Bullet Town, you do get the sense that, okay, there's some kind of crude society emerging here. I mean, they're basically warlords and everything. But it's a little bit more of a society than what you had in like Road Warrior, and kind of an extension. Like if you're following the movies, it's a bit more Thunderdome than it is Road Warrior in terms of these enclaves of people. Yeah,
yes, I do, and I did think that again when I watched this. I thought, there is a hint of because they're going. Furiosa is supposed to go to Gastown at the beginning.
Yeah, basically they're trading between these towns now. Like, they've got water, and, these other towns have gas and bullets, so they're trading water for gas and bullets, and it all makes sense.
Yeah, because because amongst all the carnage, what I said at the beginning, I thought this movie goes so fast you can miss some detail. And I thought, hang on a second, there's Gastown. We don't actually see Gastown. Just hinting at it. Which kind of, I suppose, takes you back to Thunderdome, where I did think, is Mother Eternia floating around here somewhere still in Bartertown?
Yeah, Auntie Entity and Master.
Yeah, is it Auntie Entity? Yeah, it's Auntie Entity.
Oh, yeah, Auntie Entity. Auntie Entity, even though they only ever call her Auntie in that movie.
That's Auntie, which I was going to get onto.
Who run Bartertown?
I mean, Thunderdome. It's a film. I can see where there's some faults because I think George Miller lost his best friend or something on that movie. I can't remember his name now. Ben something. Anyway, he lost his producer, and I think that's kind of put him off the scent a little bit. And I've always thought with Thunderdome, it's got a good beginning, but the middle was just a little bit all over the place, and then try to sort of
I agree, and the big problem with Thunderdome is that I think the original script wasn't a Mad Max script.
No,
and then they kind of shoehorned the Mad Max stuff into it, and it feels like you said, it just feels a little schizophrenic that way, where the beginning and end are feel very Mad Max, and then the middle part of it is like, why are we doing all this stuff with these kids? This is not what I came for.
Yeah, I was kind of. I think when I watched Thunderdome, the first act when he's in, he's got the chainsaw and he's fighting the other guy, and when he spins that wheel, I kind of wish it spun onto something else, for the third act or for the second act. You know what I mean? I was thinking just a little bit round,
hit spin again. Yeah.
Give it another go.
Spin the wheel.
But it just seems like they just put in Lord of the Flies in the middle, and you're thinking, oh, hang on a second, what's going on here? And then by the end of it, it's kind of gone back to a Mad Max movie.
The thing, like, it moves in the same way that a Mad Max movie does. Like, this movie is broken almost cleanly into half hours, where, like, the first half hour is up to the point where Mad Max, gets free, or his car crashes, and then that second half hour is sort of up to the point where they hit, I think it's the other side of the valley. And then you have the half hour of, like, disillusion and, survival and whatnot. And then the final half hour is the trip back.
Yeah.
And it's a great construction, because about every 30 minutes, you're kind of shifting gears into a different film. A slightly different film, but a different film nonetheless, or you've evolved the characters or whatever. And, as a result of that, this 2-hour movie, it's almost 2 hours exactly, and it feels like it's about 20 minutes long. Because it moves so fast, and every time you're like, okay, we can take a breath, this is just a moment with the characters, and then something pops off in the next, 5 minutes. So there's really almost no downtime to this movie whatsoever.
The handbrake doesn't come on at all, does it, in this film?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you have these moments where the characters kind of stop and talk when they have to, like when you finally meet up with, these mothers who live out in the desert, who are like, yeah, no, there's nothing out here. This is all fucked.
They seem to be surviving pretty well in just the wasteland, though, don't they? They seem to be able to get fuel and supplies from somewhere.
Yeah, you kind of get the impression that they're kind of bandits, that they lure people there with this naked girl calling for help.
Oh yeah,
and then they just take whatever they can from whoever comes looking, and I guess assuming whoever's going to come, they're going to be terrible people probably, so we don't have to feel bad about this. But yeah, I mean the whole idea is like, hey, it's all crap out here. You've got to go back to where you came from and make that work.
Yeah.
And, you've got water, you've got a setup. You've just got to get rid of Immortan Joe. So how about we spend the next half hour doing that in the most spectacular possible fashion, where everything is awesome all the time.
It's just incredible. As you said, I really had to concentrate on Tom Hardy's Max throughout that sequence to see where he's gone from here. He gets picked up by a war boy and he gets thrown onto another truck, and then he's fighting. You've got to sit down and just concentrate on it, haven't you? Because you just miss bits. And the other thing I was going to say here is 150 cars were put together by the Chop Shop crew, I'd imagine. I imagine they were probably having a great time with this. And
you gotta think they were, yeah.
Yeah, here's a bunch of money. Go and make some, spectacular looking vehicles for a Mad Max film. And then only 15 survived in the end, so that's telling, isn't it? Out of 150.
Yes. Not surprising though, and I like the fact that every clan's cars look a little bit different.
Yeah.
I think it's the Gas Boys or the people from Gastown have all the spiky vehicles.
Yeah.
And then the guys who live up in the rocks are mostly just motorcycles to get around on all the rough terrain, and I like all that stuff is very cool. And of course all the Immortan Joe clan are these war boys who are super into Chrome and Valhalla, and are just they're raised to be warriors and are fucking crazy. And when they're about to meet their end, they huff some Chrome stuff, which I imagine is essentially just like crank or something.
Yeah, and they were touching on that, saying it was some sort of hallucinogenic drug in a spray that's supposed to make you more, fucked up. Going into this sort of Valhalla quest. That was a funny scene as well, wasn't it, with Nux, wasn't it? Because he says he's he has a meeting with Immortan Joe, doesn't he? And he goes, "Oh, you know, if you go and do this quest, I shall, you know, let you go to Valhalla." And he sprays his face, doesn't he? And he jumps onto the truck and he gets caught by a chain and he just falls off. And he's like, you know, it's like,
And Morton Joe's response is mediocre.
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So good. Yeah, he tells, "I will carry you to the gates of Valhalla
That was it,
myself
yeah,
if you
yeah,
get
yeah.
her." Yeah, Morton Joe is so fucking cool in this movie. Like he's clearly the villain, but what a great villain.
Yeah. And it's good to see. Was it the Hugh Keys-Bryan? Is it the guy who plays Toe Cutter? Isn't it from the original movie?
Yeah.
So it's great to see him come back.
It's again George Miller kind of paying homage to his past. Like this is a perfect example of how to do a movie in a franchise where you have total reverence for what came before you, but also are not beholden to any of it. You know, you're just like, hey, we're just gonna do it. Like, does this step on the toes of some of the earlier movies? Sure, it does, but who cares? Like, this movie's incredible. So,
Yeah,
get over it.
and on top, like I say, go, you know, with Immortan Joe, it's and I little shout out to Ricky Morgans. I've heard him say this before on his shows where he says it's really important in a movie that the bad guy needs to be really bad for you to then invest in the characters that are trying to get away from this said bad guy and all of these, you know, sort of war boys and that. And I just think that Immortan Joe looks fucking bad, and you know, his mask, and he's got this real presence, and even all the war boys and his crew are fearful of him. Do you know what I mean? Wherever he is, it's like, oh, here he is. He's like a sort of godlike character, isn't it? And it's great. It works really well.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's got that fantastic speech at the beginning where he, you know, is denying water to the citizens of his town. If you become dependent on water, you will resent its absence. You know, all that stuff. It's so good. Like, there are turns of phrase that happen within Mad Max movies where they use their own slang and you know, have little quirks, like the war boys all being obsessed with this idea of going to Valhalla. They've got this, you know, whole religion based around cars and dying in them, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But there's that great moment when you're hitting the road, once Immortan Joe realizes, hey, Furiosa has stolen my wives, and we have to go in pursuit. And the drums start playing and getting your heart racing, and you see the war boys. It's when Nicholas Hoult kind of joins into the fray.
Yeah.
But you see all the war boys like running to their cars and whatnot, and running to get steering wheels. And one of the characters, I think it's Nicholas Hoult, is just like, "Hey, what's going on?" And he yells like kidnapping, betrayal, an Imperator gone rogue. And that's his whole explanation of it. It's like, that is the most Shakespearean explanation you could possibly give of what's happening in this scene.
Yeah, but
it's right. It's just beautiful language that doesn't really answer any of the questions.
No. These guys have got an education in them, Morton Joes, you know.
Yeah. But it's so good, and like I said, that's the entry point of Nicholas Hoult, who is also a great character and character arc of, this young guy who's gonna die and knows he's gonna die young, so has given his life to Immortan Joe and becomes disillusioned with that, and by the end of his life is giving himself, like when gives that very heartbreaking "witness me" at the end, where he's like, I'm not doing this for Immortan Joe, I'm doing this for this girl that showed me some kindness.
Yeah. And I think
it's wonderful.
I think that's what goes back to what I said earlier. You each character in this film kind of has its own sort of purpose or destiny or reasons, which kind of gives it that strand of, you can watch this film from sort of 5 different perspectives from these characters, which is very clever, for a film which you've got this basic plot, but you've got some really solid character building, and of course with Nux, bringing him up, and like I say, great acting by Nicholas Hoult, who I spoke about in my last episode because he played the kid in About a Boy. So he's doing really well. But where his character then brings in the Max character, doesn't he? Because he's like, oh, I've got my blood pack, you know. I'm just connected with a catheter, isn't it? You know, and I've got to say, Tom Hardy's looking pretty good in this film, isn't he? Considering he's having all his blood sucked out of him, you know, he's still looking quite bulked up, and he's not looking very ashen or anything like that, you know.
No, I mean, Tom Hardy looks just carved out of steel in this movie. He's got his Bane look still going on. But yeah, but again, I this watch in particular, I paid attention to what he's doing in the movie, and it's just all on his face. Like his whole performance is just in these kind of quiet expressions, and like you said, just him listening to conversations, and you can see him processing all of this. Like he gives a very good, quiet performance. But he's also very funny at times. Like he'll have some looks that are almost Harrison Fordian in those moments of just like, oh shit, I've made a bad mistake. Like I shouldn't have done this. Kind of, that fallible hero that Indiana Jones is sometimes. There's a touch of that in Tom Hardy's Mad Max.
That's really good, actually. I like that. And the first thing I'm getting here is when Indy's in Last Crusade and he's on the tank and it's about to go over the cliff and he sort of looks up and it's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
and
I fucked up.
Like,
yeah.
Oh fuck. That's a good way of. I never really thought of that, but I like that. Yeah, Indiana Jones.
There's. It's one of the things that makes Indiana Jones such a great character is that he has those moments where he seems incredibly human, you know, because of the mistakes that he is clearly making in real time, and he understands that. And there's some of that in Tom Hardy's performance where you see him like one in particular where I think it's when he's still chained, but he starts sliding off the edge of the hood, and there is that kind of wide-eyed like, oh shit, like this could be it.
Yeah,
I might be done for. And there are a couple of moments like that, and even the scene with him kind of handing over the rifle, which is a little bit grander, but it is that moment of just like, I'm not the perfect person to do this thing. And it makes him, it removes him from the category of superhero and doing those things. Like Max is a dude who gets the shit kicked out of him in grand like Die Hard style as well. He's that kind of hero, the one who could get killed. Like even though it's called Mad Max and everything, like he gets jacked up in this movie, and you kind of need that to happen for the weight of everything.
But it's interesting you made that point actually, because I think that's where some films today can steer away from the audience likes to have a relatable character, someone who they can say, hell, that could be me. Do you know what I mean? In this situation where I'm way above my head in shit, but I'm still going to get battered and bruised, and I think that's why I heard you mention Die Hard. I think that's why Die Hard worked, because John McClane was kind of like, he wasn't a muscle-bound Schwarzenegger character. He was just a normal guy trying to take on these terrorists, and he gets glass in his feet, and he gets punched, and he gets bruised, and it's the same with Indiana Jones, isn't it? In Raiders of the Lost Ark, there's a scene, probably one of my favourite scenes, where he's on the bed and Marion's trying to sort of say, well, where doesn't it hurt? And he's like, well, just on the bottom edge of my chin. It's like, and
right, yeah. It's not the years, it's the mileage.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and I think Tom Hardy does this in this film because straight from the beginning, he is kind of like the underdog. And
like there's that terrific opening action sequence where he's like running through the war boy's lair, and it's the late credits, but it's when he jumps out onto this hook in very superhero fashion, but then very quickly gets dragged right back in to start the movie.
Yeah.
and that's kind of I think the one of those humanizing moments where even before you see the title of the movie, George Miller is telling you like he's not always going to get away.
Yeah,
like that's not what we're dealing with here. This isn't him, jumping out onto this hook, swinging to safety, getting to his car, and being like, "So that happened."
Mm-hmm.
He is going to be in the shit, and will he make it out of it? Well, that's what we're here to find out. And as a moviegoer, it's hard not to think, well, of course, Mad Max is going to be all right, but that whole final sequence, that whole chase scene, that action it's very good. It's very gripping. There is nothing quite as cool as an action sequence that supplies its own music. Thanks to a bunch of drummers and the duffer or whatever, the dude on guitar.
It's
so good.
And
God.
even when Max is punching him in the end and he's having a fight, he's got a couple of war boys. And the dude drops his guitar, but whilst he's getting punched, he's just trying to reach out for his guitar so he can keep on playing.
Yeah.
It's just,
it's so good. And like the score of this movie is operatic as well.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Like this movie is this weird blend of like in those car chases, it's all drums and guitar, and it rocks. And then when you're in these more emotional moments, which don't happen that often, but when they do, the score is very dramatic. And particularly that scene where, Furiosa realizes that she's brought these women all this way only to discover there is no Eden waiting for them.
Yeah.
And she walks out into the desert and just drops to her knees and screams. And it is such a powerful moment, and the score there is gorgeous.
Yeah, I always say with a film score, if I heard this without seeing the movie, I'd go, "Oh, that's Mad Max Fury Road." Like you can hear it, you can connect to it. The other thing I was going to say as well is the actual cinematography of this film, and the actual film location. They filmed it in Africa, in can't say it, Namibia. I can't.
Yeah.
And try to put my words together. It's filmed in Africa, anyways.
and the color correction on it is all like, completely overexposed, like yellows and blues, and it's beautiful. It looks at times it just looks like a painting, and it gives you an opportunity to do like a sequence like that sandstorm.
Yeah.
Which is, maybe the grandest thing that's ever happened in any Mad Max movie, is this giant, tornadoes of sand and lightning that start sweeping up these cars. Like that scene where Furiosa pushes the car into the twister and it starts to explode as it's whipping around. It's beautiful. I mean, it's incredibly violent, but that's the beauty of Fury Road, is that it's doing beautiful things with car crashes and violence. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, and I think this film also stands alone in some ways. So if you never watched any of the other films, I think you can come into this film and go and just kind of pick it up.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, this movie doesn't require that you've seen any of the other movies. I think it makes nods to them in a really smart way that doesn't, it would just, if you didn't know the movies, they would fly over your head and you would never know that it happened.
Yeah.
It's not like, well, back when I was at Thunderdome, there's none of that. It's just, it could be a sequel, it could be a reboot. It feels like a sequel because of some of those nods. If George Miller said, no, this is a total reboot, then I'm fine with that too. Doesn't matter. It exists in the Mad Max universe, and it is a different story in terms of the purity of it, because it's probably the most pure movie. That's one of the geniuses of the movie, is that it literally is, we're going to drive to this place and drive back.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate plot of the movie. But it's it's executed flawlessly. You know, it's like one of those Mortal Kombat flawless victories. Where, you know, when this movie came out, like you said, when you walk out of this theater, out of the theater for the first time after seeing this, you're just like you've been pummeled.
Yeah.
Like somebody worked the body on you for 2 hours,
That's how
and
I
you're
felt.
like, that was an incredible cinematic experience.
I felt like I needed to dust myself off. Almost felt like there's a bit of sand in my jacket. I came out.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
Well, and because you're just running through this list of everything you saw that was amazing, like, oh, the guys on the poles, that was incredible, and you know, what about all the crossbow stuff, and even the old women kind of kicked ass, and there was a Morton Joe, and the War Boys were cool, and like, it's just everything about the movie is done so right that it's one of those movies that kind of catches you up in the magic of it, where it's so fully realized a vision that there's not a moment for me when I'm watching this that I'm thinking about anything other than the movie.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it just sweeps me into it. And as much as I look at it with a critical eye, it's also one of those movies where I kind of don't have to, because I've seen it enough to know that I do think it's brilliant. I do think it's a masterpiece. So I can let myself just enjoy the experience of watching it now without having to think about like, well, I don't really like this scene, or I don't really like this performance, or whatever. It's all just like, I love everything about this. I know that I would never survive in this wasteland, but this movie kind of makes me want to live in it. You feel like you can smell this movie, like all the diesel smell.
Yeah,
and
yeah, exactly that. Yeah, that's it. And I think that's always good with a film, where you can smell that. You can smell. It's a bit like I always make these references to Jaws. Every time I watch Jaws, I feel like I can smell the sea air and the salt and everything that's going on, and Quint's engine fumes from his boat. And I always think that's when you know you're watching a good film, because you feel really tied into this. You know, George Miller is almost like reaching out and putting you into the to the TV set to say, hey, come and join me for this ride for 2 hours and forget about everything else. You know, and that's what we want. That's what we want as film lovers and moviegoers. You know, It's,
that's the holy grail.
Yeah.
It's so rare that a movie achieves what Fury Road does, and I know I'm totally filleting this movie, but I mean every word of it. It is it's truly one of those very special movies that it just sweeps you. I mean, it's kind of like Shawshank in some ways, where it's like, oh, if I just walk into a room and this is on, then that's what I'm watching.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, until the movie is done with me. I'm in its thrall, and happily so. Like, it's so sad, it's so emotionally satisfying, and it's just, you can't undersell how just down to the bone cool this movie is.
Yeah.
The cars are cool, the language is cool, the looks of the villains are cool. Mad Max is cool. Like, everything. Furiosa is rad as hell. Like, everything about it could have been the best graphic novel you ever read.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. That's a good way of describing it.
And instead, it's just one of the best movies you ever saw, and it's just perfect. I love it so much.
Well, I think we've given this film plenty of love, and I think we've covered most things. We probably haven't, because that's the point of this review, I think, is that we will probably go away later on today and go, oh, well, I forgot to mention that. But that is Fury Road, because there will be bits that you miss, and that will be the joy of rewatching it, to think, oh yeah, there's another bit of detail. There's another. I didn't see that car. Or I didn't see that character. Or I didn't realise Max did that. You know, and it just gets better on repeat viewings. But what I was going to say, Bo, is just quickly talk about the other movies. Obviously, Mad Max. The original one, which was a Ozploitation movie, which made a whole ton of money, and then obviously number 2 and then number 3, which we've already touched on. But what's your take on the other movies with Mel Gibson?
I think the first one is very different than the others. It's sort of the it's sort of as the apocalypse is happening. Like it's the end of civilization, but there's still civilization.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's a really good movie. It's a fun exploitation movie. Definitely watch the cut that's not dubbed, which is really unfortunate. But it's cool. It's a Mad Max movie, and there's a lot of action. There's a lot of crazy villains. Toe Cutter Joe is real fun. It's a great movie, and weirdly, it's gotten better the older I've gotten. Yeah. Where I enjoy the original Mad. The problem is I saw Road Warrior first.
Okay.
And then saw Mad Max, and I was like, oh, well, this doesn't have any of the desert and apocalypse and that kind of thing. But as I've watched Mad Max more, I'm like, oh, it's doing a totally different thing, but it's doing it really well. And I really like it. I mean, for being kind of an indie movie. And the stunts are crazy.
Yeah.
They're effing crazy in that movie. Knowing that at least like 12 people probably died in the making of Mad Max because they were all real stunts. Like, people just get thrown out of cars and everything. It's nuts. So, God bless the stunt people of the original Mad Max.
Yeah.
Because there were no unions involved, I'm sure. This was just knuckleheads on the backs of cars and whatnot.
I think it goes with the time for me, because I remember going into my VHS rental store and seeing the Mad Max, all three of them actually, Mad Max 1, 2 and 3, they were on that sort of plastic VHS covers that you used to have, and you could just open them up, and I can still smell the cigarette and plastic from the chain smoking guy that used to sit behind the desk. It's all that sort of
nice.
That's, you know, that sort of nostalgic smell of an old video store. You know, I'm not talking about like the mainstream blockbusters. I'm talking about the old, you know, independent,
the mom
chains,
and pops.
you know. And I think for me, it's everything goes for the time with the rental box, the poster art, and the actual movie itself. It just sort of intertwines it. It's like, and I think I might have watched number 2 first actually, and then I saw the first one. But having got older and revisited now, I think the first one kind of gives you that sort of backstory which you need with Max, and then the second one's like the sort of higher, bigger budget chase movie. Fantastic, probably one of the greatest action movies out there. And I know Thunderdome kind of gets a bit of a, and I can see why it's said not to be the best in the trilogy, but it does sort of explore the world a little bit, which I think you kind of need. So you know that there's Bartertown, Mother Entity, and there's other stuff going on. It just slows down a bit. For you to then go onto Fury Road, which is back onto like number 2, I suppose you could say, where it's just a full-on chase movie. So I'll be interested to see what. I know there's a sequel kicking around, isn't there, for Fury Road? I think it's been in the works.
So I've heard a couple of things. One, that there was going to be a sort of direct sequel to Fury Road, but also that either simultaneously or instead of that, they were doing a Furiosa prequel movie, and that seems to be moving forward because Anya Taylor-Joy has been tapped to be a young Furiosa.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah, that sounds great to me. I'm like, okay, great.
Yeah.
Is George Miller directing it? Great. I can't wait to see it.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. But yeah. All right, Bo. Well, listen, I think, like I say, I think we're giving this film plenty of love today. Gonna have to go and dust myself down and
take a shower to get all the grit off. Oh, it's so good. Oh my goodness. But Mad Max Fury Road is such a wonderful movie. If you've never seen it, listeners, what are you doing? Like, just buckle in for 2 hours of happiness.
All right, Bo. Well, listen, I didn't say this at the beginning because we jumped straight onto this because I could feel we were both kind of like, let's talk about Mad Max, you know.
Yeah.
But before I close the show up, what else have you been up to? Is there Anything that you've watched that's sort of kind of taken your fancy, or is anything you're sort of looking forward to that's coming out soon?
Definitely. I keep hearing good things about the Night House, so I need to see that. I've been doing that podcast under the Stairs summer series, so a lot of my viewing has been for that recently. But it's kind of good to go back and see a lot of the heavy hitters of the 2010s. Is where we are on that, and that's been a great deal of fun. But it's also a lot of work where I'm going back and like, oh yeah, I need to watch The Woman again because it's been about 7 years because that movie is kind of unpleasant.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's also pretty good. So that's been a lot of fun, and I'm starting to gear up here at the Legion podcasts. Of last year I did it, and I'm going to do it again this year, which is a 31 days of Halloween where there will be a mini podcast dropping every single day about a movie. And like I said, I did it in 2020. It was a lot of fun. So we're going to do another 31 days of Halloween, a little review every day of a movie to get you in the Halloween spirit. So I'm starting to watch some of those movies and put that schedule together. And that's been a lot of fun because it gets me in the Halloween spirit. Yeah. And you know, like I've started working on some decorating for Halloween and that sort of thing. So I've been in a very Halloween kind of place lately, and I couldn't be happier about that.
Well, they do say that September is the build up to the horror season, don't they? So
exactly,
you've got your license there to do it. That's not a problem. You've got your Necronomicon license to go out there and.
All I'm saying is I've got mannequin heads arriving today, so I'll leave it at that.
Oh, that's great. Oh, fantastic, man. All I was going to say was I actually watched the Suicide Squad the other day.
Yeah, I saw that you online that you had talked about this a little bit. Yeah, it's a fun movie.
Oh, I enjoyed it. I felt like it could have easily been a film that may have kicked around in 88, 89 back in the day. I think James Gunn certainly sort of fetishes that time, and yeah, I enjoyed it. There was some funny moments in there, so
that whole sequence of Peacemaker and was it Deathstroke, Bloodstroke?
Yeah, I mean,
going through the village and the punchline of that scene. Oh
yeah, I mean,
where are all my men? See anybody? Did you see anybody? I didn't see anybody on the way in. Yeah. Like all that stuff was very, very funny, and it was kind of worth the price of admission for me, which was just watching it on HBO. But that's watching that scene, I was like, this was worth it. That was very funny.
I got my $10 worth out of it just for that scene. And the other scene is where, trying not to spoil it, but when he goes around, he goes, "Well, we're actually here to rescue you." Right. Do you want me to go back in so you can do that? He said, I had a pretty good plan here as well, It's like, God, that's great. I love it. That's totally my sense of humour. So, and it's telling when, you got a character like King Shark, which is the voice of Sylvester Stallone, but he doesn't really look out of place. And that's just to say how crazy that film is, do you know what I mean? When you've got a shark dude walking around and you kind of go, yeah, that's all right. Kind of makes sense.
I think for a lot of people, the line is the starfish, and you're either there for the starfish or you're not, and I'm there for it.
Yeah. It's Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, isn't it, from Ghostbusters? I thought,
totally. Yeah. That's totally. It's the most ridiculous thing it could possibly be.
Yeah,
and that's what makes it kind of wonderful. So yeah, I thought that was a tremendous amount of fun.
So that was a little bit of a highlight for me. So I thought I'd share that out. So yeah, okay then, babe. Well, listen, as always, it is great to have you on the show. I keep luring you back to these movies.
I mean,
hey, you want to do this?
You dangle a Fury Road in front of me. That's bacon to me. I can't say no to it.
Yeah. And just before we close up, do you want to? I know you've already mentioned the 31. In Halloween, is there anything else going on in the podcast world for you? I know you
Pick Six Movies just is about to hit the 100th episode, so depending on when you're listening to this, that probably is about to drop or just dropped. Will happen this Friday, and yeah, a bunch of other stuff coming up. Like Halloween is always big, so
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot of cool, fun stuff happening around the Halloween season. So I'm very excited. It's a lot of work, but you know, this is 'tis the season, as they say, and I couldn't be more excited.
Oh yeah, yeah. The Legion page goes with a buzz, doesn't it? It's great.
Yeah, it's fun. We're gonna have a good time this year. The got some new stuff kind of cooking up, and yeah, like it's an exciting time. I've really this year in particular for Legion has been a tremendous amount of fun. So yeah, it's a good time. Stop by if you're listening to this and you don't come by the Legion podcast website. Come on by.
Go check it out. All right, Bo. Well, thanks, man. All right. Well,
thank you.
I'm going to wrap the show up now, guys. So, as always, a little bit of admin for the show. I've already mentioned the Legion podcast, so that's what I'm a part of. Go and check out all the other shows on there. I've also got another show called the Mystery Vault podcast. So go check that out. I've just done a bit of a Max Headroom instant thing. If you don't know who he is, I explain all on that episode. And you can find Bitesize Cinema on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and several other players. If you put in Bitesize Cinema podcast, it will take you somewhere to go and listen to it. I've also got a Facebook page where I'm most active, so post anything on there. If there's anything you want me to review, I'll be happy to go and do that. And the next episode coming up is going to be the Evil Dead 2 with Mark Ball. He's a fellow podcaster, so I'm excited to have him on the show. Yeah, so we'll be talking about that. It was a bit like when I spoke to you, but I said to Mark, I said, do you want to come on the show? He said, what do you want to do? I said, Evil Dead 2. He was like, yeah, take my money.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
absolutely.
We'll get crazy with that. So, yeah, so like I say, guys, hope you enjoyed that. Dust yourself down with all that sand and oil and everything. And keep it bite-sized.
If you enjoyed this show, then make sure you check out the other great shows on the Legion Podcast Network, like Cinema Psyops, Cinema Beef, Devour the Podcast, Duncan and Bo Come Correct, Exploding Heads Horror Movie Podcast, Friday the 13th, Get Slayed, The Hellming Power Hour, Hello, This is the Doom Show, Hero Hero Go Show, Kill the Cast, Underwater Kaiju from Outer Space, Jerry Hates Action, Legion After Dark, Mental Health, Obsessive Cinema, Discourse, Pick 6 Movies, the podcast by The Cemetery, the podcast on Haunted Hill, the Psychosemantic podcast, Rick Radio, House of Wax, Dude Looks Like the 80s, Rabbit and Red Radio, the Shadecast, Short Bus Cinema, 2 Drink Minimum Commentaries, the VD Clinic, Who Will Survive Horror Podcast, and Witch vs. the Doomsday Clock. With such a wide spread of shows, there is guaranteed to be a niche for you to fall in love with. Horror, politics, movies, books, sex, music, commentaries, health, video games, kaiju, action, news, comedy, and opinions that would most likely get you killed in some parts of the world. We are proud to bring you some of the best podcasting in the world. Check us out at www.legionpodcast.com, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and any other dark corner of the internet where podcasts can be found.